Well, hello there, my fellow NASCAR model builders. How y'all doing today? Well, today we're going to get off the Malibu for a little bit, and I want to cover up something I always wanted to talk to you guys about NASCAR models. And the kits we're going to talk about are the ones from the 80s that Monogram put out that were so excellent that I've talked about before. It shows you. I'm just all excited about them. I just love these cars. And we're going to show you something really cool to do with chassis and bodies and doing some swapping around and all that. Oh, okay, enough of the southern accent. Lived in the South a couple of years, and I don't think I talked like that back then. I don't know, Dennis, did I? I was just messing around in the model room, and I got something I want to show you, and we'll get back on the Malibu here real quick. But today, day off, I was just messing around here, wanted to take a little break from the Malibu, and you know, I just thought, what the heck, I'm going to share it with you guys. I think you guys are going to like this. This is really cool, especially you builders that are really into the 80s NASCARs. This is some great information for you. You can have some fun. Look at that. Whoa! Got a little tight with the mower there. Where am I old? There we go. So, we're going to get on this. Check this out. This is really cool. Just playing around with an old idea and something that I've kind of done over the years with the 80s Monogram NASCAR Grand National Stock Car kits. These were just fantastic kits. I love them. I've built so many of them to the point that even I have some old junk ones now that you see right here. Just took some out of the old parts box, and I just had this idea. I wanted to have a couple of mock-up chassis to test fit bodies, so I was kind of repairing a few of these just to have set aside for that. So in my playing around, I thought, you know what, I think I'm going to make a quick video here because I want to share this with you guys. This is something that I've discussed a lot with model car guys over the years. This will bring a little bit of knowledge to you guys who might not know so much about the old 80s cars or NASCAR in general, and you really want to build some of these and you get a hold of these great old Monogram kits. We'll first discuss in the 80s different chassis. The Banjo Matthews chassis, which is this right here. Banjo Matthews was the primary builder of most of the cars in the Cup Series through the 70s and the 80s. And then in the 80s, a young guy came around, Mike Laughlin, who started to build in the Laughlin chassis, which is right here. Banjo Matthews, his chassis was completely based off of the old Ford 66 Galaxy, which was the popular basic structure in NASCAR when the car started becoming totally fabricated for racing. They based everything off of the old 66 Galaxy. That's a whole nother story that had to do with when they wanted to use the downsized cars that were basically unibodies. That was your 66, 67 Fairlanes. They took shortened Galaxy chassis and kind of retrofitted them, and that's where the whole thing started to snowball, going from stock production cars to the fabricated race cars we know today. The Banjo Matthews car was just an excellent car, all based off of Ford design with what was called a rear steer, and I'll show you what that means. Rear steer is your steering components behind the ball joint or behind the lower control arms. That is rear steer. Where when Mike Laughlin came along in the 80s, he based his chassis off of Chevelles and Monte Carlos and stuff from the 70s, and he actually built his chassis around the front end configuration of those Chevelles, and I'll show you, which were called a front steer configuration, which is right here. You see how all the tie rods and are in front of the lower control arms and the ball joints. So if you've ever heard a rear steer chassis, front steer chassis, that's what it is. He would take, as Monogram replicated really well, modified Chevelle lower control arms, and actually for better alignment angles, the control arms were flipped. So the left one was put on the right side, the right one was put on the left. So there is your history and story about the NASCAR chassis. What Monogram did, which was beautiful replicas of the actual chassis. These are so incredibly accurate that they did the Banjo Matthews chassis and they did the Mike Laughlin chassis. And what they did is all the Banjo Matthews chassis is what us model car guys would call the Ford chassis, and the Mike Laughlin chassis was always called the GM chassis because all the Thunderbirds had this chassis in it in the kits, and all of the GM cars had this chassis. The thing in the real world of NASCAR racing is with Banjo Matthews being very popular, especially in the early 80s, coming from the 70s where primarily all the cars were Banjo cars. A lot of the GM guys would run the Banjo chassis, but run it in a GM car, like this Buick right here. Lots of times you want to replicate an actual car that team would run a Banjo Matthews chassis. The Mountain Duke Buick that was owned by Junior Johnson and driven by Darrell Waltrip in the 81 and 82 season. This is a replica of the 82 car. They were all Banjo chassis. Pretty much everything that Junior did in those years was Banjo chassis. So in order to build a correct Mountain Dew car, you need to use this chassis. But there's other cars you could do it all the way up until like 1986 when this body style was ran, which is the 1986-87 Oldsmobile Delta 88. I don't know particularly if Cal Yarborough's team did this. This is an old junk body I just pulled out. I'm just using it just for representation. There were still teams that were still using old Banjos. Many times that could have been a car that either was with that team all those years or got sold to other lower level teams, and you could have a chassis that could be 5-6 years old and just have new sheet metal on it. It could have been a Ford at one time. Sometimes teams would change from Ford to Chevrolet or vice versa, and they'd keep their same cars and just reskin them. That was the beauty and the versatility of these chassis. They were pretty much, everything was almost exact as far as wheelbase and everything, because it was strict NASCAR rules they had to follow. So any sheet metal could go on these. So let's go back to the model car world. In the model car world, we can, again, swap anything, which is real easy to do with this Buick. And I'm going to show you when you want to do a good representation of a GM Banjo Matthews car. Lots of times you could do this with the Ford Thunderbird, but it was very rare. As a matter of fact, I have never seen a Ford Thunderbird in the 80s that had a Laughlin chassis. That might have happened. I don't know. I've never seen it, so I'm not going to even cover that. But it was very prominent in the GM camps to run Banjo chassis. Now first I'm going to start with what came out of the kit was the Laughlin chassis, and here is the Buick. This was what came in this Buick kit basically, or any of the GM kits later on in Monte Carlo, even on into like that Oldsmobile I showed you earlier, the Delta 88, and on into when they started doing the 88 Grand Prix, also the earlier Grand Prix, all the GM models done up to Monogram producing them up to about 1992, 93. They used this chassis for a long time. But it was originally made to fit this body right here, which it is a perfect fit. And you got yourself, of course, I not making it look perfect because I'm just a mediocre modeler. Let's get this all in here. And you can see how that just all clips in real nice. It's just perfect. And if you can set your stance, it's all perfect. Everything works really well, and you can see the roll bars go into all the right places. It's just an excellent looking model. They did such an awesome job on these. I keep going on about that, but I really love these kits. There you go. You've got your Laughlin chassis in your Buick. But for me, I want to do an exact representation of Darrell Waltrip's car from the 1982 season. And that car had a Banjo chassis. So we're going to completely nix this Laughlin chassis because it is not correct. So what? It's gone. Goodbye. And we're going to replace it with the Banjo chassis. Hello. Isn't movie magic just awesome? Or YouTube magic, I should say. We're going to play with this. Now, I've got this thing and kind of all set up for mocking up any kind of body. That's what I kind of made it for, and there's a reason why I made it so this whole center section here is removable. But for this right now, we're going to keep this thing completely Banjo. Sorry, I had to go off camera and get this all back together. So this is exactly, except I don't have the down bars. It's not that big of a deal. But this is pretty much out of the box from a Ford Thunderbird kit of the Banjo Matthews chassis. And I'm using all Ford Thunderbird dimensions for this car. Now, it doesn't clip in quite as good as the chassis that was made as far as in the kit for this body, but it fits in there. You have to cut a few things off, which I did already, that clips the Thunderbird body on. And it's a little different here. So it doesn't quite clip in good, but it fits on there. And you can see everything is right. You can do your lowering of the front end. This is kind of at stock height. These things always had a tendency to sit a little high. That's for another video. But you can see everything fits in really well. The roll cage is a little bit more narrower. The Thunderbird had a little bit more narrower greenhouse. So this isn't quite exact, but it'll work pretty good for doing these cars and doing this particular Buick. You could pretty much right out of the box do a swap, done, handled. Very minor changes. And once you glue this in, if you don't like to remove them, I don't like removing my bodies and showing the chassis. I just like getting the body on there and it's permanent. Or you can leave it. It stays in there pretty good. It's a little loose, but it gets you your look. You want a Banjo chassis in your GM car? There you go. Especially your early Buicks. Fits perfect. No modifications whatsoever. It's a whole heck of a lot of fun, and then you can do your detail or lack of detail just out of the box. A Chevy engine fits in there just fine. I don't believe there's any modifications that need to be done. Pretty much all this is the same. Still uses the GM trailing arms from the trucks. It's perfect. It works great. So there you go. And you can see this chassis was actually back in the day. I probably did it 20 years ago. You can tell I was making this car. That's how we have it. But here's another thing you can do. Let's take these apart. So let's say you want to do, bam, did it again. YouTube magic. Isn't it cool? We're going to want to do this at 86 or 87. This actually represents the 87 Oldsmobile Delta 88, which was, for those of you who might not realize, was the first time in like 1986 was the first time that NASCAR changed the rules to allow front-wheel drive cars, because basically everything was going front-wheel drive. If they wanted to keep this stock car thing going and running stock sheet metal sort of and representative cars that were on the street of the day, they had to start allowing front-wheel drive cars to run. But front wheel isn't going to work in this racing because they kept on with the same chassis. So NASCAR changed the rules, allowing front-wheel drive bodies to be put on these rear-wheel drive chassis. We want this to go on to this chassis, so it fits just fine, and you got yourself a Banjo chassis in this 86, 87 Olds. Only problem I found with this, and you also find this with, bam, YouTube magic, this body right here, which is the Monogram 1988 Pontiac Grand Prix. Just a little bit different shape. These two cars than the older Buicks. Not so, they're a little more rounded, so the greenhouse has a little bit of a different shape to it. So if you're wanting to put the Banjo chassis underneath these bodies, you're going to have to change something, because if you see up in here, you can really see it right there. Look at how far in that roll cage is from the Thunderbird. It's made the shape of the Thunderbird, and the Thunderbird greenhouse, again, is a lot narrower. These are a little bit wider than that square Buick that I showed you earlier. So what you can do, let's pop this off, is, that's why I have this removable, is completely take this section out of the Thunderbird chassis. Don't need it. With very little modification, you can take the total roll cage section of the Mike Laughlin chassis with some modifications, like you're going to have to trim some of the firewall that is molded onto that. We've got all this that has to get trimmed off. Part of the firewall and the whole front area here. I just whacked that off and kind of got this a little more, ground it down to be a little more thinner. Also had to remove this so it would fit onto the Banjo Matthews chassis, Ford chassis. Just got the roll cage all together and it pops right on. It's kind of loosely fitting right now, but it gives you the idea. Later on, if you were to make this an actual model, again, this is just for mock-up for my use. I'm not going to worry about it. You can trim a little more right around there. Make this fit a little better, but I just like to get it in there just to get the proper idea of what's going on here. And I leave it like this because right now this is a little bit adjustable, and you'll want that adjustability depending on what body you're going to use. So I don't glue it in place until I get it fitted up in the body and see where I want it to go. And we take this, we fit it all together, and bing bam boom, we got our wheelbase correct. This is kind of like pushed as far forward as it will go, and you can see in there that the roll cage fits in this body a little better. It just has a bit of a more conformed look. If you got yourself a Banjo Matthews chassis in your 86 or 87 Oldsmobile Delta 88, or if you can ever get one of the conversions, you can change this into a Buick LeSabre. That's for another video. So that's what I wanted to show you guys. I think that's just a fun thing to do for you NASCAR builders. If you wanted some versatility in your builds, do something different. You've been building a ton of these GM cars over the years and always using the same chassis, and you always thought, hey, you know what, I want to do a Banjo Matthews car with a GM skin on it. There you go. There's your options. It's real easy to do, simple modifications, and you have yourself a really cool look. So there you have it. I hope that was real informative for you. Some neat stuff to know about NASCAR, and if you got an interest in building accurate cars, correct for those teams, you know, have fun with it. It's a real easy modification on models. Thought I'd share that with you. It's something I've done for a lot of years and always talked about. But I hope you really like this video. Punch the like button. Really would love for you guys, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. I got my Teespring with my shirts and my mugs and all my other stuff. I got links below to all my friends and family's other YouTube channels. And I wanted to let you guys know I'm back with Patreon again. I got things worked out. You guys who were supporting me on Patreon, I ended up getting my money and worked things out with Patreon. So we're back with that again. For you guys who want to be coming up and meet me at the Model Car Show on November 4th out in California in Pomona at the NHRA Museum, gonna be there. Still planning on going. But I hate to say it, I don't think the Malibu is going to make it because, well, I'm a little behind on that. My work schedule and babysitting kind of took me away from getting some model building done, so I'm a little behind. I don't think I'm going to be able to catch up to get that model done for the contest, but, you know, I'm going to have other models to bring. Plus, I kind of want to get them all kind of prepared for the show, so I'm going to have to work on those a little bit. Yeah, you're probably saying, you're wasting time with this video. Why don't you get back? You know, hey, I'm having fun. I want to share something with you. You just need to take breaks and do other things. And I thought this was something cool to bring to you guys, so I hope you enjoyed it. So as I like to say, this is me, Luka Cee. Keep gluing your fingers together. Keep cutting that styrene, and we'll see you in the next video. Keep cupping that. Keep cupping. And I got something in my throat, so I'm going to drink some cold coffee. Wow, that was like, wow, Starbucks cold. Ooh, well, hello there, all my... Ooh there, hello there, my fellow NASCAR model builders. How y'all doing today? Well, today we're going to do a NASCAR